Ambassador Krelvoth stood outside the human delegation's quarters aboard the Galactic Assembly Station, his four upper appendages trembling slightly. The Velthari diplomat had served his species for over 200 standard cycles. He had negotiated with the warlike Krethnak, the deceptive Silithians, and even the enigmatic Void Dancers. None of them had ever made him feel the way humans did. Fear. Not the kind of fear one feels facing a predator. This was something deeper, something that made his species' collective consciousness shudder whenever the word human appeared in diplomatic communications. "You are troubled, Ambassador," said his aide Maritha, a younger Velthari whose bioluminescent patches flickered with concern. "I am about to negotiate a trade agreement with humans," Krelvoth replied. "I have every reason to be troubled." Maritha's patches dimmed. "But Ambassador, the humans are known to be fair. They do not seek conquest. They do not practice deception. Why would you fear them?" Krelvoth turned to face his young aide. "That is precisely why I fear them. Have you studied the incident of Theta 7? "I have read the official reports, Ambassador." "Then you know nothing." Krelvoth began walking toward the human quarters, his aide following close behind. 43 cycles ago, the humans made a trade agreement with the Theta 7 mining consortium. It was a simple agreement. The humans would provide agricultural technology. In return, the consortium would supply rare minerals at a fixed rate for 100 cycles. "That sounds standard," Maritha said. "It was, until the Great Collapse happened. The consortium's primary mining world was destroyed by an unexpected stellar event. Their economy collapsed. Their government fell apart. 3 different factions went to war over the remaining resources. For 20 cycles, chaos ruled that sector." They reached the entrance to the human delegation's wing. Krelvoth paused, his voice dropping lower. Everyone forgot about the agreement. Everyone except the humans. When the dust finally settled and a new government emerged, do you know what the humans did? Maritha's patches flickered uncertainly. "They renegotiated." "No," Krelvoth's voice was barely a whisper. "They showed up with 43 years' worth of agricultural technology, everything they had promised, everything they had continued producing and storing, even while the consortium burned. They delivered it all, asked for nothing in return, and simply said that they understood the consortium was not in a position to fulfill their end of the bargain right now." "That is generous." "That is terrifying." Krelvoth turned to face his aide fully. "They kept track. For 43 cycles, through wars and collapses and complete governmental changes, they kept track. They remembered, and they fulfilled their promise without being asked, without any expectation of return. Surely that makes them trustworthy partners." "It makes them something far more dangerous. It makes them beings who expect the same from others." Krelvoth's appendages tightened. "When you make a promise to a human, you are not making a promise to an individual. You are making a promise to their entire species, and they never, ever forget." The door to the human quarters slid open. A human female stood in the entrance, her face arranged in what Krelvoth had learned to recognize as a smile. It was an expression that showed teeth, which in most species would indicate aggression. In humans, it was supposedly friendly. "Ambassador Krelvoth," she said, her voice warm. "I'm Sarah Chen, lead negotiator for the Earth Trade Council. We've been looking forward to this meeting." Krelvoth observed her carefully. She was small by human standards, with dark hair pulled back from her face and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. There was nothing threatening about her appearance. But then, there never was with humans. That was what made them so dangerous. "Negotiator Chen," he replied, using the formal human address he had memorized. "The Velthari Collective is honored by this opportunity." "Please call me Sarah." She stepped aside to let them enter. "We've prepared refreshments. I understand Velthari metabolisms can process Earth tea." "You have done your research," Krelvoth said carefully. "We always do." Sarah led them into a meeting room. We want to make sure we can honor any commitments we make. Can't do that without understanding our partners. There it was, that simple statement that carried so much weight. Honor any commitments. To a human, those words were as binding as any contract. To a Velthari, they were a warning. The meeting room was simple by galactic standards. A round table, comfortable chairs adapted for multiple species, and a large window showing the stars beyond. But Krelvoth noticed something on the wall that made his appendages go rigid. It was a plaque. On it were words in the human language called English. A promise made is a debt unpaid. Robert W. Service. Sarah noticed his gaze. Ah, you're looking at our motto. It's from one of our poets. It reminds us of what we believe. Your species has a saying that promises are debts. We have many sayings about promises. Sarah sat down at the table and gestured for them to do the same. A man is only as good as his word. Promises are made to be kept. Your word is your bond. We take these things seriously. Krelvoth settled into his chair, trying to keep his appendages from trembling. I have studied human history. You have not always kept your promises to each other. Sarah's expression shifted slightly. No, we haven't, and we remember every broken promise in our history. We teach them to our children. We write books about them. We make movies about them. The pain of broken promises is something we carry in our collective memory. You remember your failures. We remember everything. Sarah's eyes met his. That's how we learn. That's how we make sure we don't make the same mistakes again. When humanity went to the stars, we made a collective decision. We would not bring our worst habits with us. We would bring our best. Maritha leaned forward. But surely you cannot control every human. We don't need to control them. Sarah smiled again, and Krelvoth felt that familiar chill. We just teach them. From the moment a human child can understand language, we teach them about promises. We teach them that their word matters. We teach them that breaking a promise hurts not just the person you made it to, but everyone who will ever trust you again. And if a human breaks a promise anyway? Krelvoth asked. Sarah's expression became very serious. Then they faced the consequences. Not just legal consequences, though those exist. Social consequences. A human who breaks their word is marked. Not physically, but in a way that matters more. People remember. People talk. And in a connected society, a broken promise follows you forever. She pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. Shall we begin the formal negotiations? I've prepared a draft agreement based on preliminary discussions. Krelvoth looked at the device. He knew that whatever words appeared on that agreement would be treated by the humans as sacred. They would move worlds to fulfill them, and they would expect the same from the Velthari. That was what made humans terrifying. Not their weapons, not their technology, not their numbers. It was their absolute, unwavering commitment to keeping their word. And their expectation that you would do the same. The negotiations began simply enough. The Velthari Collective wanted access to human medical technology, specifically their advances in cellular regeneration. The humans wanted access to Velthari deep space communication networks, which could transmit data across vast distances in ways human technology could not yet replicate. On paper, it was a straightforward exchange. But Krelvoth had been a diplomat long enough to know that nothing was ever straightforward. The basic framework looks acceptable, he said, studying the draft agreement on the display screen. But I notice your timeline extends for 300 cycles. That's correct, Sarah replied. We've found that longer agreements tend to be more stable. It gives both parties time to build infrastructure, train personnel, and really integrate the shared technologies into their societies. 300 cycles is a long time. Krelvoth's appendages twitched. Much can change. That's true, Sarah nodded. Which is why we've included renewal clauses and modification procedures. But the core commitment remains. If we agree to provide cellular regeneration technology for 300 cycles, We will provide it for 300 cycles, regardless of what changes. Maritha spoke up. What if your government changes? What if different leaders decide they no longer wish to honor the agreement? Sarah's smile returned, but there was something harder in it now. Our governments change regularly. We have elections, sometimes revolutions. Leaders come and go, but our commitments remain. We have a saying, treaties outlive those who sign them. A promise made by one human government is a promise kept by all human governments that follow. That seems difficult to enforce, Krelvoth said. It's not about enforcement, it's about identity. Sarah leaned forward. Humans define themselves by their commitments. A new government that broke an old promise wouldn't just be breaking a treaty. They would be saying, we are not who we said we were. And for humans, that's unacceptable. Krelvoth thought about his own species. The Velthari collective operated through consensus, their decisions guided by the combined thoughts of billions. But that consensus shifted over time. Agreements made by one generation were often revisited by the next. It was considered normal, healthy even. To grow and change meant to reconsider old decisions. Humans, apparently, did not see it that way. Tell me about the Krethnak incident, he said suddenly. Sarah's expression flickered with recognition. You've done your research too. I have heard rumors. I would like to hear the truth. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. 28 cycles ago, we made a mutual defense agreement with the Krethnak. They were expanding into territory that bordered several hostile species. They wanted assurance that if they were attacked, we would come to their aid. The Krethnak are not an easy species to ally with, Krelvoth observed. The Krethnak were known throughout the galaxy as aggressive, territorial, and prone to solving problems through violence. No, they're not, but they asked for our help and we gave our word. In return, they promised to provide us with certain rare materials from their mining operations. Sarah paused. The Krethnak are not known for keeping promises. Most species consider their agreements to be temporary conveniences at best. I am aware of their reputation. 5 cycles into the agreement, the Krethnak decided they no longer needed us. Their expansion had gone well. They had new allies. They stopped providing the materials they had promised. When we asked them about it, they laughed. They said the agreement had served its purpose and was no longer necessary. Krelvoth felt his appendages tense. He could guess where this story was going. 3 cycles later, the Krethnak were attacked. Their new allies abandoned them. Their enemies saw an opportunity and struck hard. The Krethnak found themselves fighting a war on 3 fronts with no support. And the humans? We came. Sarah's voice was even calm. We honored our defense agreement. We sent ships, soldiers, supplies. We fought alongside the Krethnak even though they had broken their word to us. Maritha made a sound of surprise. You helped them even after they betrayed you. We made a promise. Their breaking their promise didn't free us from ours. Sarah met Krelvoth's gaze. We told them what we were going to do before we did it. We said, we will honor our commitment to defend you because that is who we are. But when this war is over, we will remember that you did not honor your commitment to us. What happened after the war? The Krethnak won. With our help, they pushed back their enemies and secured their territory. And then they came to us, wanting to renegotiate. They wanted new agreements, new partnerships. They had seen what human allies could do. And you refused. We didn't refuse. We simply told them the truth. Sarah's smile was gone now. We told them that we would be happy to make new agreements, but we also told them that we would never forget that they had broken their word. Every agreement we made with them from that point forward would carry that memory. Every negotiation would start from a position of distrust. That seems harsh, Maritha said. It's not harsh, it's honest. Sarah turned to the young Velthari. The Krethnak made a choice. They decided that their word didn't matter. We showed them that to us our word is everything, and we showed them that we remember. How did the Krethnak respond? At first they were angry. They thought we were being petty, but over time they began to understand. Now, 20 cycles later, the Krethnek are known as some of the most reliable treaty partners in the galaxy, because they learned something from us. What did they learn? That promises matter, that your word is your identity, that when you break a promise, you don't just hurt the other party, you hurt yourself. You become someone who cannot be trusted. Sarah's voice softened. The Krethnak spent 15 cycles rebuilding their reputation. They had to prove over and over again that they had changed. It would have been so much easier if they had simply kept their word in the first place. Krelvoth sat in silence for a long moment. He understood now why his people feared humans. It wasn't the strength of their military or the cleverness of their technology. It was their absolute certainty in the power of a promise. To a human, a promise was not just words. It was a bond that transcended time, circumstances, even rationality. They would keep their word even when it hurt them. They would keep their word even when the other party didn't deserve it. And they would remember forever when others failed to do the same. I need to consult with my government, Krelvoth said finally. This agreement, it requires careful consideration. Sarah nodded, showing no surprise or disappointment. Of course, take whatever time you need. We'll be here when you're ready. She said it like it was a simple statement of fact, but Krelvoth heard the deeper truth in her words. We'll be here forever. That's what humans do. They wait, they remember, and they never ever let go of a promise. The Velthari Collective took 3 standard days to deliberate. For a species that operated through shared consciousness, this was an unusually long time. Krelvoth spent most of it in deep communion with the collective mind, sharing his experiences, his fears, and his strange new understanding of humans. The response from the collective was mixed. Some felt that humans were exactly what the Velthari needed, reliable partners who could be trusted absolutely. Others were terrified by the implications. What if the Velthari made a promise they couldn't keep? What if circumstances changed? What if they needed to adapt? In the end, the collective reached a consensus. They would proceed with the negotiations, but they would be very, very careful about what they promised. When Krelvoth returned to the human quarters, Sarah was waiting for him. She looked exactly as she had 3 days before. Patient, calm, ready. We have decided to continue, Krelvoth said, but we have some questions. Of course, Sarah gestured to the meeting room. That's what negotiations are for. They settled into their seats. This time, Krelvoth noticed that there were more humans in the room. Scientists, he assumed, based on their manner of dress. Experts in the technology being discussed. My first question, Krelvoth began, is about the nature of your promises. You say humans keep their word forever, but surely there must be limits. What if keeping a promise becomes impossible? Sarah considered this carefully before responding. There's a difference between impossible and difficult. If something is truly impossible, then yes, we acknowledge that. We communicate clearly, we explain the situation, and we do everything in our power to find an alternative way to honor the spirit of the commitment even if we can't fulfill the letter. Can you give me an example? Certainly. Sarah nodded to one of the scientists, a gray-haired man who stepped forward. This is Dr. Marcus Webb. He was involved in one of our more challenging situations. Dr. Webb had the same calm demeanor as Sarah, but there was something tired in his eyes. Old weight, Krelvoth thought, the weight of promises kept. 30 cycles ago, Dr. Webb began, we made an agreement with the Silithians. We promised to share our agricultural advances, specifically our ability to grow food in toxic environments. The Silithians were facing a crisis. Their primary food worlds were being poisoned by a natural phenomenon. Without help, their species faced starvation. The Silithians, Krelvoth said slowly, they are known for their flexible approach to truth. Dr. Webb smiled sadly. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. The Silithians lie as naturally as they breathe. It's part of their culture. They don't see deception the way other species do. And yet you made a promise to them. They were dying, millions of them. Whatever their culture says about truth, they are still living beings. Dr. Webb's voice was firm. We promised to help and we meant it. What happened? We sent our technology, we sent our experts. We spent years working with the Silithians to adapt our methods to their worlds, and it worked. Their food production stabilized. The crisis was averted. Dr. Webb paused. But then we discovered something. They had lied to you. They had lied about everything. There was no natural phenomenon poisoning their worlds. They had done it themselves, deliberately, to gain sympathy and support from the galactic community. The entire crisis was manufactured. Krelvoth's appendages tightened with shock. They poisoned their own worlds. For political gain, they wanted to appear weak so that other species would underestimate them, and they wanted free technology from anyone willing to help. Dr. Webb shook his head. When we found out, there was outrage. Humans don't respond well to being deceived. What did you do? We kept our promise. Dr. Webb met Krelvoth's gaze. We had promised to help them grow food in toxic environments. We hadn't promised to do so only if they were honest about why they needed help. Our word was our word. But surely you felt betrayed. Of course we did, and we told them that. We made it very clear that we knew what they had done. We made it very clear that we were disappointed, angry, and hurt. But we also made it clear that our feelings didn't change our obligations. Sarah spoke up. We completed our agreement to the letter. Every piece of technology we had promised delivered. Every expert we had committed sent. And when it was done, we told the Silithians exactly where they stood with humanity. Which was, they were no longer trustworthy partners. Any future agreements would require verification at every step. We would never again take their word for anything, and we would remember their deception forever. Dr. Webb nodded. That was 30 cycles ago. Today, the Silithians are the most careful species in the galaxy when it comes to agreements. They verify everything multiple times. They provide evidence for every claim. They have become, ironically, models of transparency. Because of how you responded. Because they learned what it meant to lose human trust. Sarah's voice was soft but firm. We didn't punish them. We didn't seek revenge. We simply showed them the consequences of their choices, and we kept our word even when they didn't deserve it. Krelvoth sat in silence, processing this information. The humans hadn't acted out of anger or revenge. They had acted out of principle. They had kept their promise because their promise mattered, regardless of whether the other party deserved their loyalty. And in doing so, they had changed an entire species. I understand now, he said finally. Your promises are not about the other party, they are about you. Sarah smiled, and for the first time Krelvoth saw warmth in it. Exactly. When we make a promise, we're not just committing to another species. We're committing to ourselves. We're saying this is who we are. Breaking a promise doesn't just hurt the other party. It hurts us. It makes us less than what we want to be. And that is why other species fear you. Perhaps, Sarah's smile faded slightly, but I prefer to think of it differently. I prefer to think that other species respect us, because they know that when we give our word, we mean it. They know that they can trust us absolutely. And in a galaxy full of uncertainty, that trust is worth more than any technology or territory. Krelvoth thought about this. Trust. It was such a simple concept, yet the humans had built their entire diplomatic identity around it. Shall we continue with the negotiations? Sarah asked. Yes, Krelvoth said, but first I must tell you something. Of course. The Velthari Collective has not always kept its promises. The admission was difficult, but Krelvoth forced himself to continue. In the past, we have adapted to circumstances. We have allowed agreements to fade when they no longer served our interests. We have not remembered our commitments the way you remember yours." Sarah nodded slowly. "We know." "You know." "We research everyone we negotiate with, Ambassador. We know the Velthari have a flexible approach to long-term commitments." She paused. "It's one of the reasons this agreement has been so carefully drafted. We've included mechanisms for adaptation and change. We've built in reviews and modifications. We've tried to create an agreement that can grow with both our species." "You anticipated our concerns." "We tried to understand them." Sarah leaned forward. "Ambassador, we don't expect other species to be like us. We don't expect everyone to treat promises the way we do. What we expect is honesty. If the Velthari cannot commit to something, tell us. If you need flexibility, ask for it. If circumstances change, communicate. That's all we ask." Krelvoth felt something shift inside him. For the first time since he had begun these negotiations, the fear was beginning to fade. In its place was something else, something that felt almost like hope. "Then let us continue," he said, "and let us build something that both our species can be proud of." The negotiations continued for another week. Each day, Krelvoth learned something new about humans. He learned that they documented everything, not out of suspicion, but out of respect for the future. "Memories fade," Sarah explained, "but written records endure. We write things down so that future generations will know exactly what was promised." He learned that humans had entire institutions devoted to keeping promises. Legal systems, of course, but also cultural traditions, educational programs, and even religious practices. "Keeping your word is sacred to us," one of the human scientists said. "It's part of how we define what it means to be human." He learned that humans told stories about promise-keeping, tales of heroes who sacrificed everything to honor their commitments, villains who fell because they broke their word, children's stories that taught the youngest humans about the importance of trust. But the most important lesson came near the end of the negotiations, when a crisis threatened to destroy everything they had built. It started with a message from the Velthari Collective. A new faction had emerged, one that opposed the agreement with humans. They argued that binding the collective to such rigid commitments was dangerous, that humans were too inflexible, that the Velthari needed freedom to adapt, not chains of obligation. The faction was small but vocal, and in the Velthari Collective, even small voices could shift the consensus. Krelvoth delivered the news to Sarah with heavy hearts. "I am sorry," he said. "The collective is reconsidering. The agreement may not move forward." Sarah listened carefully, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "May I speak to the collective?" she asked. Krelvoth was surprised. "You want to address the entire collective, directly?" "If that's possible. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'd like the chance to explain." The request was unusual. No outsider had ever addressed the Velthari Collective directly, but Krelvoth found himself wanting to give Sarah this chance. Something about her calm certainty made him believe she could make a difference. He arranged the communication. Sarah stood alone in a small chamber, surrounded by sensors that would transmit her words and image to billions of Velthari minds. "Members of the Velthari Collective," she began, "I understand your concerns. You fear that making promises to humans will trap you, that our insistence on keeping commitments will limit your freedom to grow and change. I want to tell you that you are right to have these concerns, but I also want to tell you that you have misunderstood what human promises mean." The collective listened. Krelvoth could feel their attention through his connection, billions of minds focused on this single human female. "When humans make a promise," Sarah continued, "we are not creating a cage, we are building a bridge. A promise is a connection between two parties, a foundation on which trust can be built. And trust, true trust, is the most valuable thing in the universe. Think about what happens when you cannot trust anyone. Every interaction becomes a calculation. Every agreement becomes a risk. Every relationship is temporary, fragile, unreliable. In a universe without trust, you are alone. No matter how many others surround you, you are fundamentally, deeply alone. Sarah's voice softened. Humans learned this lesson the hard way. Our history is full of broken promises, betrayed trust, relationships destroyed by deception. We have felt the pain of distrust. We have lived in that lonely universe. And we decided together that we didn't want to live that way anymore. So we made a choice. We chose to keep our promises even when it was hard, even when it hurt, even when the other party didn't deserve our loyalty. Not because we expected others to do the same, but because we wanted to be the kind of beings who could be trusted. We wanted to offer the galaxy something rare and precious. We wanted to offer certainty. She paused, letting her words settle into billions of minds. I know you fear being bound. I know you value your freedom to adapt. But I ask you to consider this. What kind of freedom is it if no one trusts you? What kind of adaptation is it if you can never build lasting relationships? The freedom to break your word is also the freedom to be alone. Humans don't ask you to be like us. We don't demand that you adopt our ways. All we ask is that you be honest with us. If you can commit to something, commit fully. If you cannot, tell us and we will find another way. But don't make promises you don't intend to keep. Don't say words you don't mean. Because in the end, the only thing any of us really has is our word. Sarah fell silent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Krelvoth felt something shift in the collective consciousness. The opposition faction was still there, but their voices were being drowned out by something else. Understanding, respect, and perhaps, just perhaps, a desire to be worthy of human trust. The collective reached a new consensus. The agreement would proceed. When the communication ended, Krelvoth found Sarah sitting alone in the chamber, her head bowed. He approached carefully. That was remarkable, he said. You changed billions of minds with a single speech. Sarah looked up. There were tears in her eyes, another human expression that Krelvoth was still learning to interpret. I just told them the truth, she said. Humans are terrified of loneliness. We'll do almost anything to avoid it. Keeping our promises is how we make sure we never have to be alone. Is that why you do it? Fear of loneliness? Partly, Sarah wiped her eyes. But also because it's right, because we want to be good, because we've seen what happens when people can't trust each other and we don't want to live in that kind of universe. She laughed softly. Also, we're stubborn. When we commit to something, we really commit. It's both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. Krelvoth considered this. I think, he said slowly, that the Velthari collective has much to learn from humanity. And we have much to learn from you. Sarah stood and extended her hand, a human gesture of greeting and agreement. Shall we finish what we started? Krelvoth reached out with one of his appendages and wrapped it around her hand. It was an awkward gesture, physically, but the meaning was clear. Yes, he said, let us finish what we started, and let us keep our promises together. 50 cycles later, Ambassador Krelvoth stood in the great hall of the Galactic Assembly. He was old now, his bioluminescent patches dimmer than they had once been, his appendages moving more slowly. But his mind was sharp, and his memory was clear. He was here to give a speech. The Assembly had asked him to share his perspective on human-alien relations, a topic on which he had become something of an expert. But as he looked out at the gathered representatives of 100 different species, he found himself thinking not about politics or diplomacy, but about promises. 50 cycles ago, he began, I was terrified of humans. There was a murmur in the assembly. Several representatives from species that had dealt with humans nodded in recognition. I was terrified because humans keep their promises, forever, without exception, without excuse. When a human gives their word, they mean it. When they make a commitment, they honor it, no matter what. He paused, letting his words settle over the assembly. Many of you share this fear. I have spoken with diplomats from dozens of species who approach human negotiations with the same anxiety I once felt. They worry about being bound. They worry about being held to standards they cannot meet. They worry about the long memory of humanity, which forgets nothing and forgives slowly. I am here to tell you that your fear is misplaced, not because humans are not what you think they are, but because you have misunderstood what their promises mean. Krelvoth moved to the center of the speaking platform, his old joints protesting but his voice still strong. 50 cycles ago, the Velthari Collective signed an agreement with humanity. We promised to share our communication technology. They promised to share their medical advances. The agreement was for 300 cycles. In those 50 cycles, we have faced 3 major crises: a plague that threatened our core worlds, a civil conflict that nearly tore our collective apart, an economic collapse that left us unable to meet our obligations for almost a decade. Each time, we feared what the humans would do. Each time, we expected them to demand immediate compliance, to hold us to the letter of our agreement regardless of circumstances. Each time, we prepared for conflict. He smiled, a gesture he had learned from humans and found increasingly natural. Each time we were wrong. When the plague struck, the humans sent medical ships before we even asked for help. They did not demand that we continue our technology transfers while our people were dying. They simply said, "We are here. We will help. The agreement can wait until you are well." When the civil conflict threatened our stability, the humans offered to mediate. They did not take sides. They did not try to exploit our weakness. They simply said, "We made a promise to the Velthari Collective. We intend to keep it, whoever leads that collective when the conflict ends." When our economy collapsed and we could not fulfill our obligations, the humans did something that shocked us. They continued to provide their medical technology free of charge while we rebuilt. They said, "A promise is not conditional on the other party's ability to pay. We promise to help you and we will help you." Krelvoth looked out at the assembly, seeing faces both familiar and strange. "Do you understand what I am telling you? Human promises are not chains, they are lifelines. When you make an agreement with humans, you are not binding yourself to a harsh master. You are connecting yourself to a partner who will never abandon you, never forget you, never let you fall. Yes, they expect you to keep your word. Yes, they remember when you fail to do so, but they also remember when you try. They remember when you communicate. They remember when you struggle in good faith to honor your commitments, and they respond to that effort with support, not punishment." He took a deep breath. 50 cycles ago, I asked a human negotiator why her species was so committed to keeping promises. She told me something I have never forgotten. She said, "Because promises are how we tell the universe who we are." I did not understand her then. I understand her now. The Velthari Collective was once known as a species that adapted to circumstances, that allowed our commitments to shift with our needs, that prioritized flexibility over reliability. We were survivors, we told ourselves. We did what was necessary. Now we are something different. Now we are a species that keeps its word. Not because the humans forced us to change, but because they showed us what was possible. They showed us that promises could be strength, not weakness. That commitment could be freedom, not constraint. That trust could be the foundation of something greater than any individual species could build alone. Krelvoth straightened, his old body remembering the posture of his younger days. "I am told that many species in this assembly fear humans. I am told that diplomats tremble when they enter negotiations with humanity. I am told that the human reputation for keeping promises has become something like a legend or a warning. I say to you, do not fear, be grateful. Be grateful that in this vast, cold, uncertain universe, there is one species that will never break its word. One species that will stand by you when everything else falls apart. One species that believes with absolute conviction that a promise made is a sacred thing. The humans are not perfect. They have their flaws, their conflicts, their struggles. But in this one thing they are extraordinary. In this one thing they have changed the galaxy. He looked toward the human delegation where Sarah Chen sat. She was older now too, her hair gray, her face lined with age. But she was smiling and there were tears in her eyes. 50 cycles ago, Krelvoth said, I made a promise to a human. I promised that the Velthari Collective would honor our agreement, not just for the 300 cycles specified in the contract, but forever, because that is who we have become. That is who humanity taught us to be. I stand before you today to tell you that we have kept that promise. Every year, every crisis, every change of leadership, we have kept our word because our word is who we are. And we will keep it forever. He raised one of his appendages in a gesture of salute, directed at the human delegation. Because that is what we learned from humanity. That is the gift they gave to the galaxy. Not technology, not power, not wealth, trust. The simple, profound, revolutionary gift of being able to believe in someone else's word. So when you negotiate with humans, do not be afraid. Be honored, be grateful, be worthy of their trust. And when you make a promise to them, mean it, because they will remember, forever. And so will you. The assembly hall was silent for a long moment. Then, starting with the human delegation and spreading outward like ripples in water, applause began. It grew and grew until it filled the entire hall, a thunder of approval from 100 different species. Krelvoth bowed his head and stepped down from the platform. Sarah Chen was waiting for him. That was beautiful, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It was true, he replied, every word. She reached out and took his appendage in her hand, just as she had 50 cycles before. I promised you once that humanity would never let the Velthari down, she said. I intend to keep that promise. I know you will, Krelvoth said. That is what humans do. They stood together in the great hall, two old friends from different worlds, bound by something stronger than any contract or treaty, bound by trust, bound by promises kept. And outside the windows of the Galactic Assembly, the stars burned on, witnesses to a galaxy that was slowly, surely, learning what humans had always known. A promise is forever. And that is not something to fear. It is something to celebrate. The end.